worldwide, AGA, reporting live from Cape Canaveral, MK, Big Sack, let's ride. Back in time.
Week one is here. Week one is here, and it feels so great. The weather here in Middle Tennessee feeling a little bit crisper outside, a little bit cool. Feels like fall, and it's here. And I'm so excited that I get to talk about this with all of you as well. Welcome into the Air Raid with Parker Kelley on ESPN 102.5 The Game. I have a lot I want to get into. Now, because there are so many great games over the course of Labor Day weekend, I have to split it up into two different shows in terms of my picks and previews for these games. So I'm going to do half of the previews on this show. I'm going to release another episode later on in the week, either Thursday or Friday, and I'm going to predict the rest of the games then and there. I also have a new edition of my PK poll, which is my personal top 25 that I will be releasing each and every week throughout the season. I have my ACC win total projections. If you remember, I did this with the Big 12 on the last episode that I did that dropped on Monday. And I have an interesting thought that I want to get to wrap up the show. So much to talk about. It seems like we don't have enough time. That's why we're doing 3 episodes a week, because there's plenty of stuff to talk about. Please remember to subscribe to the Game Nashville Sports Network podcast wherever you get your fine listening materials. You will find every episode that we do here at the Air Raid on that very platform. And also, please follow me on the socials, because I post all of this stuff to my personal Twitter and Instagram at Parker_Kelley10. Let's go ahead and get into it. So I wanted to do the Friday games first. So I start off with a big one, a matchup that is not commonly played, and that is going to be happening in Waco, Texas on Friday. It's the Fox game, 7 p.m. Central Time kickoff. Auburn at Baylor. Again, this is not a commonly played matchup, but it is certainly one that is going to be exciting for various reasons, one of which being that Auburn is a complete wild card this year, and the other fact is the Big 12, as you have heard me say several times, is so unpredictable, and I expect Baylor to be a team that can potentially contend for a Big 12 title. Now, I think they are going to be a dark horse, but we will have to see. So Auburn and Baylor, Waco, Texas, SEC versus Big 12. If you're looking at the betting odds, Auburn is currently a 2.5-point favorite. So this is what the numbers are telling you, is that this is basically at a pick'em, because I could honestly make an argument for either side. If you held a gun to my head and tell me why I think Auburn could win this game, I could do it. But if the reverse were saying, and you held a gun to my head and say, hey, explain why Baylor could win this game, I could also do it. I could go either way. But I'm going to have to make a pick, and I will do so. So Auburn, what most people don't know about them is they have one of the deepest offensive lines in the entire SEC. You could make an argument for the deepest line in the SEC, and in terms of quality, I think it's right up there at the top as well. But the roster's so talented too. If you look at the receivers, they go out and they get Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech, who is the most coveted wide receiver in the transfer portal. You pair him with Cam Coleman, who is a 5-star wide receiver and as a true freshman last year balled out, but he was kind of overshadowed by guys like Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State and Ryan Williams at Alabama, Ryan Wingo at Texas. But Cam Coleman is right up there as well, and he can certainly be one of the best wide receivers in America. So the roster talent is there. They have NFL guys on the defensive side of the ball, led by Kedrick Falk on their defensive line. They have one of the most talented rosters. But here's what it boils down to. Quarterback. They bring in Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma. Jackson Arnold really struggled with turnovers at Oklahoma. Now, I contribute some of that to the scheme, the offensive scheme that Seth Luttrell ran at Oklahoma. I contribute a little bit of that to the coaching, And Oklahoma fired Seth Luttrell last year, so that kind of goes to show you that it wasn't entirely Jackson Arnold's fault. So Hugh Freeze is banking on the fact that he can get Jackson Arnold fixed. He can work a little bit of magic. I still haven't sold my stock on Jackson Arnold. He was very talented coming out of high school, a 5-star. Hugh Freeze has worked with some great quarterbacks in the past. He's a QB guru. So I'd like to see what he can do with Jackson Arnold. But if it boils down to quarterback matchups, if you look on the opposite sideline, Baylor has Sawyer Robertson, who right now I would say is a better quarterback than Jackson Arnold. But if we're looking at overall rosters and talent, I'd have to lean Auburn. Now, here's the thing. Auburn has the talent edge. Baylor has the quarterback edge. But here's what I think it really boils down to is Auburn's offensive line versus Baylor's defensive line. I think Baylor's defensive line is a little, what's the right word? Auburn's offensive line is bigger and heavier than Baylor's defensive line. So I think that is going to be the key matchup to watch. And I think Auburn's offensive line is going to lean on Baylor's defensive line as the game progresses. And I'm leaning Auburn on this one. I think Auburn is going to win this game. I think it is going to be very close. Again, I can make an argument for either side, but I'm going to pick Auburn to win in Waco, Texas. Moving on, the other Friday night game that will actually be played at the same time on ESPN, Georgia Tech at Colorado. Now, as you all know, I picked Georgia Tech to be my ACC title game versus Clemson, so I'm kind of spoiling the anticipation of me actually making the pick because you know where I'm going with this. But I'm going to explain why. I am picking Georgia Tech. So Colorado, they just named their starting quarterback, Caden Salter, the transfer from Liberty, who is also one time at Tennessee. Caden Salter, it's not really a surprise that he was named the starter. He was going up against Juju Lewis, who was a very talented recruit coming out of high school. Many expected Caden Salter to win the job. He did. I just have questions about the surrounding pieces around Caden Salter because Colorado lost their top 4 pass catchers. They don't have great depth along the offensive or defensive lines. In fact, the starters and the people that they're going to be running out on the field, I don't have a lot of confidence in. I do, on the other hand, have a lot of confidence in Georgia Tech's offensive and defensive line because they embody the characteristic traits of their head coach, Brent Key, who likes to impose his will on the other team. They play very physical in the trenches. The run game is going to be very, very good, especially with quarterback Haynes King, who I am very high on. I just have a ton of questions at the line of scrimmage for Colorado. And I think Georgia Tech, much like I think is what's going to happen with Auburn and Baylor, I think Georgia Tech's just going to lean on Colorado. And yes, Colorado does have the advantage because they will be at home. Georgia Tech has to get adjusted to the altitude of playing in Colorado, but I like Georgia Tech to win this game outright, and I think Georgia Tech will. So I'm picking the Ramblin' Wreck, the Yellow Jackets. Moving on, I threw in the 2 Sunday games and the Monday game because I want to save my Saturday picks for the next show. So I'm going to Sunday, the 2 o'clock Central Time game, ABC being played in Atlanta. Virginia Tech in South Carolina, a.k.a. the Beamer Bowl. So this game is being played a day after the Tennessee-Syracuse game in Atlanta. I do not see many worlds in this game where South Carolina does not end up running away with this game. Now, I've had my uncertainties about South Carolina, the surrounding pieces around Lenore Sellers on the offense. Sources out of South Carolina have told the media that they feel much better about the receiver room than those of us on the outside looking in. Because when I'm looking at South Carolina, I'm like, okay, I see Nick Harbor. He'll be catching passes for Lenore Sellers. We know that he's a true speed threat at wide receiver. But who else is going to be catching passes from Lenore Sellers? But those who cover South Carolina say that the receiver room is going to be a lot better than we expect. I'm like, okay, so I'll take their word for it. We'll just kind of have to see how it plays out. But South Carolina got big news the other day as running back transfer from Utah State, Rashul Faison, has been ruled eligible for the 2025 season. So he'll be ready to go, and that's big news for South Carolina. Now we flip over to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, you have Dylan Stewart coming off the edge, who was a true freshman last year, going to be a sophomore, first-team AP preseason All-American. But I have questions surrounding Dylan Stewart because South Carolina's defense was just rated by the NFL draft. So I have questions, and I would just label them as questions and not concerns because we haven't seen South Carolina play yet. But I just think, despite all the uncertainties, I have more uncertainties with Virginia Tech. I know their quarterback, Kyron Drones, and he's solid, but he hasn't shown that he is an elite to very good quarterback yet in college football. Now, he very well could this season, but we just haven't seen that yet. But I have so many more questions with Virginia Tech. So I'm going with the team that I'm more certain in, and that's South Carolina. And again, I think South Carolina is going to just run away with this game as the game progresses. Again, I don't see many worlds in which that does not happen for the Gamecocks, so I am picking South Carolina to get it done in Atlanta in the Beamer Bowl over Virginia Tech. We get 2 straight days with a very highly anticipated primetime matchup on Sunday night in Coral Gables. Miami hosts Notre Dame. The biggest storyline in this game to me is Carson Beck. Because if you remember a year ago, before the 2024 season was played, we were talking about Carson Beck being the Heisman frontrunner. We were talking about Carson Beck potentially being the number 1 overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft. If I would have said before last season started, now let's all close our eyes and let's imagine it's before the 2024 season. Could you imagine somebody saying Carson Beck is going to transfer after the 2024 season and not declare for the NFL draft? In fact, Georgia is going to be happy with the fact that Carson Beck is leaving and going to a different school. Could you imagine somebody saying that and the response that you would get before the 2024 season even happened? They would have laughed at you because we were all talking about Carson Beck being the number 1 overall pick. And I still think Carson Beck is really good. I just think he had a lot of pressure on him because the run game ranked in the hundreds last year at Georgia and a lot of the vital rushing statistics. Receivers were dropping balls left and right, so a lot of the pressure was on Carson Beck. I still think Carson Beck is really, really good, and he can be good in this Miami offense with Shannon Dawson. Notre Dame last year ranked 4th nationally in points per game allowed at 15.5. They also ranked 4th nationally in passing yards allowed with right under 170 passing yards per game. Now, the run defense was not as great. They allowed 138 rushing yards per game. I think Miami, one of Miami's biggest strengths is their offensive line. Physically, they're about as impressive as you can get nationally. I think they'll be able to run the ball with Mark Fletcher on Notre Dame, and I think Carson Beck is the more experienced quarterback. Well, he is, I don't think. I know he's the more experienced quarterback because you have C.J. Carr on the other side who's getting his first taste at being the starting quarterback at a prestigious school like Notre Dame. Now, I'm still very confident in the direction and the future of Notre Dame under Marcus Freeman and the talent that they have on their roster. I'm very confident in their run game with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. But I think Miami is going to win this game due to the fact that I believe they'll be able to run the ball on Notre Dame. I believe Carson Beck is the more experienced passer. Miami's brought in some receivers from the portal to help with the passing game. I think Miami's defensive line, now their defense was horrendous last year, but they go out and they got Corey Heatherman from Minnesota. I believe he's going to be able to shore up that back end of the defense because the secondary needed a lot of help. But the defensive line is pretty solid, and I believe they're going to be able to get pressure on a young quarterback and force him to make mental errors. So I'm going Miami to beat Notre Dame at home on Sunday night. Now, the final game I want to get to, and I'll make this preview quick because I know we have a lot of other things to get into. TCU at North Carolina. A lot of eyes are going to be on this game because it is a standalone game, Monday night, Labor Day, Bill Belichick's debut. We, as national media, do not know what to expect from this North Carolina team, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. If they tell you they know how things are going to play out for North Carolina, they are fooling you because none of us know, and none of us should act like we know. Now, North Carolina has one of, if not the easiest schedule in the ACC. TCU has a guy on their sideline by the name of Josh Hoover, one of the most underrated quarterbacks talked about nationally. TCU in 2024 ranked 8th in the nation last year in passing yards per game at 313 yards per game. Josh Hoover is a stud. North Carolina just announced their starting quarterback, Gia Lopez, who is a transfer from South Alabama. There was a lot of roster turnover. Go figure when you have a coaching change and you go and you get a bunch of guys from the portal. Just because I don't know what to expect from North Carolina, and I'm slightly more confident in TCU, I believe they're right up there with Baylor in terms of dark horses to win the Big 12. I'm picking TCU to win this one on the road, and I will reveal, well, I picked TCU to go 8-4 this season, and I think one of those wins is on the road in Chapel Hill. When we come back from the break, I have my week 1 PK poll, and I will reveal that. You're not going to want to miss it. You're listening to the Air Raid with Parker Kelley on ESPN 1025 The Game. Segment number 2 here on the Air Raid with Parker Kelley on ESPN 1025 The Game. I have a new PK poll for week 1. Now, I did one for the preseason, and it has changed a little bit just because I'm gathering some new intel on some of these teams, and obviously the results of Iowa State, Kansas State played a little bit of a role in this. Not too much, but just a little bit. But I've just been gathering intel on some of these teams and wanted to put out a fresh one for week 1. Again, this will be a weekly thing as results of games will change this, will impact this. Let's go ahead and start with number 1. That has not changed, and that is the Texas Longhorns. That kind of speaks for itself. At number 2, I have Penn State, the Nittany Lions. That has not changed either. Number 3 is going to be Clemson. So the top 3 remain unchanged from my original week 0 preseason poll that I put out. Number 4 has changed because I had LSU in that old slot at number 4. I have bumped Alabama up to number 4 because I predicted them. You remember the show that I did with Connor in which we predicted how we thought the college football playoff bracket would pan out. I had Alabama winning my national championship. I have Alabama at 4. I think they're going to be a lot better than most people expect. At number 5, Ohio State. Ohio State did lose a lot of production from last year's teams, but their problems are not the same problems that other teams who lose a lot of production have to deal with because it is Ohio State. As they like to say, it's the Ohio State. They backfill really well in recruiting. They get a bunch of 5-star, 4-star guys, high-end 3-stars to come in on their team. So the talent is there. It's just not as experienced as some of the other teams. At number 6, I have Georgia. I believe Georgia, the X factor for them this season is will they have solid offensive line play. They went out and they got Illinois running back Josh McCray, who I believe will be big in the run game for them. I think the receiver room for Georgia not being talked about enough. It'll help out Gunnar Stockton. Obviously, if the offensive line is really, really good. They didn't run out and get a lot of interior offensive linemen or tackles from the transfer portal. So that shows you that the coaching staff believes in the collective unit of the offensive line. If they are able to perform at a high level this year, watch out for Georgia. At number 7, I have Oregon. I believe Oregon is a legit national championship contender. I believe that Dan Lanning and company have learned from last year getting bounced in the quarterfinals in blowout fashion by Big Ten counterpart Ohio State. I believe they've learned from that. I believe Oregon is going to be, in terms of overall talent construction and who all they have on the roster, I believe it is up there at the top of college football. I have Oregon at number 7. LSU, I originally had at number 4. They're right back to number 8. Now, I still think right now that they will win the SEC. However, I do have some questions surrounding the offensive line, and that's why I'm really excited to see how they play versus Clemson on Saturday night, because Clemson has a very, very talented defensive line and really that entire defense in general. So I have LSU at 8. I have Notre Dame at number 9. Miami at 10. That'll be interesting because they play on Sunday night. So Miami at 10 is unchanged. I had Notre Dame at 8. I just bumped them back one spot to number 9. I have Arizona State at 11, Oklahoma at 12. That has not changed. What has changed is that number 13 spot, and I flip-flop Florida and Illinois. I have Florida at 13. I believe if Florida gets a healthy DJ Lagway, they can make the college football playoff. The only thing is DJ Lagway has not been healthy throughout the course of the spring and winter months, but I believe a healthy DJ Lagway, if they get in the college football playoff, they have enough talent to win the whole thing. Illinois, I have at 14. I believe in the returning production they have. We'll just have to see how things play out because they have a very workable schedule for the Big Ten. And I do believe in Luke Altmaier at quarterback. I believe in Gabe Jukas, who is their linebacker, who is a first-team All-American. I'm excited to watch Illinois this year. South Carolina is unchanged at 15. Michigan and Texas A&M I have at 16 and 17. That is unchanged. Georgia Tech at 18. That is unchanged. Number 19, I have the Iowa State Cyclones, who I did not have ranked, which is a fault of my own, I will admit. I have them at the number 19 spot after their showing in Farmageddon in Week 0 against Kansas State. Rocco Becht, I thought, was a major X factor and a big-time player for them. I have Iowa State at 19. I have them going 10-2. And I could easily see them knocking on the door of the Big 12 title game just like they were last year. However, I think Texas Tech, who is not too far on down the list, I have Texas Tech at 21, and I have Ole Miss at 20. Ole Miss, I still think they'll be fine defensively. I do not think they'll be as good as they were defensively last year because they rely so much on the portal. But Austin Simmons, I believe, is going to have a very, very bright future, but he is inexperienced. I think 20 is a safe spot to put Ole Miss. And then, like I mentioned, I have Texas Tech at 21, which is down a couple of spots from the first poll I put out. Texas Tech is playing a game of not as much Russian roulette because they did go get a lot of guys from the portal. They finished with the second-ranked portal class right behind LSU. They were very close to being that number 1 spot, but they went out and they bought this year's team. So they're kind of testing the waters. They're a case study. They're a trial run to see if you can legitimately win a championship with a team of players that you bought. We're going to have to see if these guys can develop chemistry. I personally have been very high on Texas Tech. I have them in my Big 12 title game, which means that if they were to win, they would be in the college football playoff. I've said from the beginning since January that they are a dark horse contender for the 12-team college football playoff. I'm very high on Texas Tech. I have them at 21. I have Tennessee, same spot at number 22. Joey Aguilar, a new quarterback. There's some questions at wide receiver, questions about the running back room. I'm very high on what the offensive line and the tight end room will bring. I think that is one of the brighter spots for them on offense. Defense should be fine under defensive coordinator Tim Banks. That defensive line still has a lot of rotational guys that are really, really good. I'm very confident in the backers and Jeremiah Thielander and Arion Carter. They have an AP first-team All-American in the preseason in Jermon McCoy. I believe secondary is going to be a strength on that defense as well. I have Tennessee at 22, Indiana at 23. I'd like to see what Curt Cignetti can do with Cal transfer at quarterback Fernando Mendoza, who I believe physically is more talented than Curtis Rourke was this time last year. Fernando Mendoza is a lot higher on NFL draft scouts' radars than Curtis Rourke was. I'm excited to see what he can do with him. I had Indiana at 23 in my first poll that came out. I have them at 23 now. Louisville is also at 24. I'm very confident in the trenches. I'm very confident in the run game, that defense, Miller Moss, and SMU at 25. Now, here's who Kansas State obviously dropped out of the list considering their loss week 0 against Iowa State. 3 teams that I really wanted to put on this list that I just didn't know where to squeak them in, but I think will be on here at some point. Boise State, I have them as my group of 5 representative in the college football playoff. I think they'll make their way onto this. They actually play Thursday night against USF. That'll be a fun one to watch. USC, I could see USC being a team that could sneak on here and actually move up pretty far the rankings. I will do my Big Ten win-loss record prediction soon, so I will have something on USC here shortly, and I have a feeling they're going to have a pretty good record this year. And Utah, I really believe in Utah. I believe in Kyle Whittingham. I believe, we're talking about Oklahoma bringing over the quarterback and offensive coordinator from a place, bringing it on over to Norman. Utah did the same thing. Devin Dampier from New Mexico, Tim Beck, his offensive coordinator. I believe it's going to work. Utah does not have a lot of losing seasons like they did last year. Kyle Whittingham is going to get his team to bounce back. They could have one of the best offensive lines in the Big 12. They're really good defensively on that side of the ball. I wanted to squeak in Utah, but who knows? Maybe they will be here soon. We'll just have to see how things play out. They do have UCLA and Nico Iamaleava week 1, so you'll have to stay tuned for that. So that is my top 25. Real quick, I'm going to just give a brief rundown. Texas at number 1, Penn State at 2, Clemson at 3, Alabama at 4, Ohio State at 5, Georgia at 6, Oregon at 7, LSU at 8, Notre Dame at 9, Miami at 10, Arizona State at 11, Oklahoma at 12, Florida at 13, Illinois at 14, South Carolina at 15, Michigan 16, Texas A&M 17, Georgia Tech at 18, Iowa State at 19, Ole Miss at 20, Texas Tech at 21, Tennessee at 22, Indiana 23, Louisville 24, SMU 25. When we come back, I have my win-loss projections for each team in the ACC. You're going to want to hear that. You're listening to The Air Raid with Parker Kelley on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back into The Air Raid with Parker Kelley on ESPN 102.5 The Game. We have to move at a brisk pace here, and that's okay because we have a lot of information crammed into a tight 46-minute window, but that's okay. I have my ACC team win-loss projection, and I'm going to go through each team in the Atlantic Coast Conference and give you my win-loss projection for that team. Starting with, we're going to go in alphabetical order here. So starting with Boston College, I have the Boston College Eagles going 4-8. I do not have a lot of confidence in this team as it stands right now in year 2 under Bill O'Brien. So I have the Eagles going 4-8. Moving on out to the not Atlantic Coast, to the Pacific Coast. It's still crazy to me that Cal is in the ACC, but I have Cal going 6-6. I believe they have a lot of workable games on their schedule. Here's the thing about Cal. They were absolutely ravaged by the transfer portal, but I have a lot of confidence in their starting quarterback. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. You can look it up on your spare time. I'll just give his initials, JKS. He's a former 5-star quarterback who was originally committed to the University of Oregon, got to campus in the winter. realized how good Dante Moore was. Then he transferred to Cal, back to his hometown. So, again, former 5-star. He's very young. I mean, he's a true freshman starting right away. So he's going to have some mistakes and some bumps along the road. But I believe that he is a very precise deep ball passer, very accurate, and just having that room to be able to grow. Getting the experience, being thrown in the fire, drinking from a water hose. I believe that that is going to be very good for him. And I have Cal just getting to bowl eligibility, getting to 6-6. If they don't win at least 6 games, I don't see them doing any better than that, but I could totally see them doing worse. So I have Cal at 6-6 as it stands right now. Moving on to Clemson. This is the team that you all probably wanted to hear about most. I have Clemson going for, I have them as the 4 seed in my college football playoff. I have them getting a first-round bye, and I have them going 11-1. And I could see a world in which they go 12-0, but I am making room for at least one loss in there. So the games that I'm looking at, LSU, obviously, week 1. I'm going to predict that game on my next show, so I'm not going to talk too much about that as it stands right now. They're at Georgia Tech in week 3. They have SMU on October 18th. They're at home versus Florida State on November 8th. They're at Louisville on a Friday night on November 14th. If you remember, Louisville came into Clemson's building last year and absolutely whooped them. So that's a game that I'm sure Clemson fans have circled on their schedule. And then they're at South Carolina to cap off the season. I think they lose one of those games. And I could see a world in which maybe they lose 2. I don't see many teams going undefeated in the regular season in this era of college athletics. So I have Clemson going 11-1. Moving on to Duke. Year 2 for Manny Diaz. Darian Mensah is the quarterback there. Here's one thing that you can count on for a Manny Diaz coach team. They are going to have a good defense. And getting Darian Mensah from Tulane, paying him as much money as they are, I think they're going to be an under-the-radar team. Now, they do have some tough games. They host Illinois in week 2. They're on the road at Cal, and not because Cal is going to be a great team by any means, but they have to go to the West Coast. So that is going to be a weird adjustment for a team that's playing on the Atlantic Coast. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, they're at Tulane in week 3. So Darian Mensah is going back to his former school. That'll be interesting. They take on Georgia Tech. They get them at home October 18th. They're at Clemson on November 11th. So they have a bye week sandwiched in between that Georgia Tech and Clemson game. I think Duke will go 8-4 or 9-3, but I'm leaning 8-4 as it stands right now. Moving on to Florida State. Florida State, one of the main wild cards, not just in the ACC, but in the entire country. Nobody expected them to go 2-10 last year, but it happened. They went out and they got Gus Malzahn to be their offensive coordinator. They stole away Tony White from Nebraska to be their defensive coordinator. 2 great hires, in my opinion. They got Thomas Castellanos, Tommy C as I like to call him, from Boston College. Now, obviously, they opened with Alabama, so that's going to be a tough one. They have Miami, but they get them at home on October the 4th. They're at Clemson on November 8th, and then they end their season with Florida, but that is in Gainesville. I think that's 4 losses for you right there, not to spoil any predictions that I'm going to make later on. But I have Florida State going 8-4, which is a massive improvement from last year. But I have Florida State going 8-4. I think that's pretty fair considering what all transpired last year. Georgia Tech, the team that I had in my ACC title game as they take on Clemson, as I think it'll play out. They're at Colorado. I already predicted that they would win that game. They have Clemson in week 3. They have Pitt, their second to last game of the regular season. I think Pitt is going to be a sneaky good team this year. And then they end their season with Georgia. They don't get Georgia at home, but they're not having to play on the road. They're playing at a neutral site game in Atlanta, which is still technically a home game for Georgia Tech. I I have Georgia Tech going 10-2. And I believe that if they went anything less than 10-2, they wouldn't be playing in the ACC title. But I have them going 10-2 and playing in the conference championship game. Moving on to Louisville. Louisville's a very interesting team with Miller Moss at quarterback, a transfer from USC. Jeff Brom, I believe one of the most underrated coaches that's talked about nationally. They have a pretty tough ACC schedule. They're at Pitt in week 4. Again, I told you I think Pitt's going to be a sneaky good team this year. They're at Miami on October 17th. They're at SMU the second to last game of the regular season, and then they have Clemson right before that SMU game, but Clemson is at home. I see Louisville going 9-3 this year just because I'm very confident in their run game with Isaac Brown, who is a second-team preseason All-American. Miller Moss, I believe, is a really, really good quarterback still. I think they're going to play tough defense, be tough in the trenches. So I have Louisville going 9-3. Moving on to Miami. I just predicted Miami to beat Notre Dame. I didn't have Miami in my college football playoff prediction, but I could see them knocking on the door, and I believe they will be. Miami does have an odd schedule because they open with Notre Dame. They have Florida State. They have Florida before they have Florida State, but there's a bye week sandwiched in between the Florida and Florida State game. They get Florida at home, but they're on the road at Florida State. They're at SMU on the first weekend in November 1st to be exact. And then they end their season with 2 straight road games at Virginia Tech and at Pitt. 2 cold weather environments for a South Florida team. And then if they happen to, and my prediction falls flat on its face, if Miami happens to make the ACC championship game, they would be playing a 3rd straight road game in cold weather. I don't know how Charlotte typically is weather-wise around December, but I assume it's not warm. They would have to play 3 straight road games to end their season. That would be tough. I do have Miami going 10-2 because I'm very confident in what Carson Beck will be able to contribute to the offense. I believe Corey Heatherman is going to be a massive upgrade at defensive coordinator, and he's going to help that defense out a lot. Now, it may not all show in year 1, but I believe in the future, Miami's defense is in good hands. I have Miami going 10-2. NC State, I have a lot of questions about. I'm just going to go through that one quickly. I like their quarterback, CJ Bailey, but I have NC State going 5-7. North Carolina, again, they have a super easy schedule, but a lot of roster turnover, a lot of roster concerns. Really, the only tough games they play, they open with TCU, and then they have Clemson on October 4th, but Clemson they'll get that one at home. They do have to travel out to Cal on October 17th, but that is coming off of a bye. I see North Carolina going 7-5, which would get them to a bowl game in year 1 under Bill Belichick. But I don't see North Carolina, despite the easy schedule, I don't see them being a super good team. So we're just going to have to see how that one plays out. Moving on to Pitt. Pitt is my sleeper team in the ACC because they have 2, not 1, but 2 preseason All-Americans in Desmond Reed, an athlete who he does a little bit of everything. He runs the ball, catches the ball, punt return, kick return. If you haven't familiarized yourself with Desmond Reed, go ahead and do that. And they also have a linebacker, Kyle Lewis, but again, both first-team AP All-Americans in the preseason. I have Pitt going 7-5, but I could easily see them doing slightly better. Let's go ahead and take a look at their schedule. So they have a pretty easy first 3 games. So they have Duquesne, they have Central Michigan, and they're at West Virginia. I don't expect West Virginia to be a good team, so I see them starting off 3-0. Then they get Louisville in week 4, but they get a bye week. So they have an early bye week after the West Virginia game, which will get them prepared for Louisville. They are at Florida State on October 11th. They have to travel out to Stanford. They get Notre Dame the 3rd to last week of the regular season. That back half of the season, they have to close out their regular season. They get Notre Dame at home, they're at Georgia Tech, and then they host Miami. So 2 of the 3 are at home for Pitt, but that's 3 tough opponents that you have to play back to back to back. So I see Pitt going 7-5. I could see them maybe going 8-4. 9-3 might be a stretch, but I think 7-5 is probably just about right. SMU, a team that made their first ever college football playoff appearance last season. They returned their quarterback, Kevin Jennings. I believe they're ranked 16th. Yeah, that seems right. They're 16th in the initial AP poll that came out. SMU, let's talk about SMU because they have 2 interesting games in their first 4 games of the regular season. They get Baylor week 2 at home. Week 4, they're at TCU. So I applaud SMU for playing 2 in-state opponents, used to be rivals. I'm very excited for those games. They're at Clemson on October 18th. They have Miami November 1st, first weekend of November. They have Louisville, second to last week of the regular season. I'm going to be honest, I see SMU falling off a little bit from where they were last season. And it's still not a bad record. I have them going 8-4. 8-4 is not a bad record, but it's just not where they were last year, finishing the regular season at 11-1. They do return their quarterback, Kevin Jennings, but they lost a lot of production on the defensive side of the football, and they also lost some weapons. They lost their running back, Rashard Smith, to the NFL draft. So outside of Kevin Jennings, I really have some question marks for SMU, so I have SMU going 8-4. Stanford just lost to Hawaii in week 0. I don't expect Stanford to be very good at all. I have them going 3-9. Let's go to Syracuse. Syracuse is a team that lost a lot of production as well. Syracuse, they opened the season with Tennessee. They're at Clemson in week 4. They're at SMU on October 4th. They're at Georgia Tech. They're at Miami. They're at Notre Dame. So a lot of tough road games for Syracuse. I have Syracuse going 6-6. So still good enough to make a bowl game, but I don't see their offense being where it was last season, and I don't see their record being as good either. Virginia, not a lot of confidence in Virginia. I have them going 4-8. Virginia Tech, I have going 6-6 because outside of their quarterback, Kyron Drones, I don't really know a whole lot about this team. And when I say I don't know, there's a lot of question marks and a lot of things that we need to see play out on the field for Virginia Tech. Wake Forest, I don't see being very good. I have them going 5-7. By the way, do you know the name of Wake Forest starting quarterback? I guarantee you've heard the name before, but you just probably forgot about him. It's Robbie Ashford, guy who was at Auburn, Oregon, South Carolina. Now he is at Wake Forest. He will be the starting quarterback, but I have Wake Forest going 5-7. I don't see them being very good on the field, at least this year. All right, I have a quick thought to get to close out the show. We'll get to that on the other side. You're listening to The Air Raid with Parker Kelley on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Okay, so quick thought to wrap up the show here. Since we were just talking about ACC teams, I have a quick thought kind of surrounding the ACC, and I think week 1 for the conference, they either have a chance to fall flat on their face and it be a disastrous week 1 for the ACC, or they have a chance to make a giant statement. So obviously things did not start out well for the conference because Stanford lost at Hawaii in week 0, but I'm just focusing on week 1. Let's look at all the notable games that the ACC plays in just in week 1 alone. Georgia Tech goes to Colorado on Friday night, Syracuse and Tennessee on Saturday morning, Alabama at Florida State Saturday afternoon, LSU at Clemson on Saturday night, Virginia Tech and South Carolina on Sunday afternoon, and Notre Dame at Miami on Sunday night. If those are all games in which I could see the ACC team losing. And if the ACC team were to go 0-6, that would be a disastrous start for the ACC. But if they were able to get 4, 5, 6 would be what the ACC and Commissioner Jim Phillips would hope for. But this is the ACC has a lot of notable games in week 1. So things can either go really, really well, like I said, or the ACC wins 2, 1, none games. I mean, a disastrous start for the ACC. And think about it. You have Clemson, you have Georgia Tech, and you have Miami. Teams that I think will be at the top of the ACC in terms of standings by the end of the year. They all have really tough either road environments or teams that they're playing in week 1, and putting yourself in a difficult situation starting 0-1 would not be ideal. That Clemson LSU game is probably the one I'm most excited to watch because I think Clemson and LSU are both legit national championship contenders. Notre Dame and Miami, I don't know how I feel about Miami as being a national championship contender. I could maybe see them as a fringe. I think there are 9 teams capable of winning a national championship heading into the 2025 season. Miami might be at number 10. I could see Notre Dame potentially doing that as well. But yeah, those are the slate of ACC games in week 1. Things could either go very, very poor for the conference, or they could go really, really well. We'll just have to wait and find out. That is the beauty of college football. That's what God made the falls for. Talking season's over. Now it's just about playing the games and seeing what happens on the field, settling it out there on the turf. Really appreciate you listening to the Air Raid with Parker Kelley. I'll have another episode here for you shortly in which I will preview Saturday's games as well as make my picks. I also have some more interesting segments that I plan on doing. Please make sure that you're subscribed to the Game Nashville Sports Network podcast wherever you get your fine listening materials, and follow me on the socials as well at Parker_Kelley10. You'll never miss any of the content that is dropping surrounding this show. I have another episode for you shortly. In the meantime, take care, and I'll talk to you soon.